Hey everybody, I'm Marty, also known as Raging Owlbear on social media, and I've got a Kickstarter going right now, and it's only $3. And let me tell you why it might interest you. First, it's only $3. But second, I'm trying to sort of find a middle ground between, say, something like this and something like this. So we have the sort of classic, basic, expert style game on one hand, and then we have the more sort of bells and whistles, player's handbook, 5th edition style game in the other hand. I think there's something that's in between that will satisfy a lot of players who are from sort of the old school, this side, the old school family, but who also enjoy 5th edition play. And I'm kind of like that. I really like 5th edition play, but some of the power levels are a little bit high, especially as you level up past 5th, 6th, 7th level. It gets a little bit, your players are less like Daredevil and Luke Cage and more like Thor and Iron Man and Captain America, but that really high level cinematic power play, which is great if you're into that kind of game. But some of us might want to just dial that back, where you're still a hero, you still have some cinematic capabilities, but you're not completely indestructible, and the world is still dangerous, and there's just a little bit more grit and grind in that kind of game. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to sort of go back to what this kind of game might look like if you do have some of the bells and whistles of this game, but not necessarily all of them. And if you want some very specific details, I'm about to go really deep on you. But at the very least, if you stop right here, go check out the Kickstarter. It's only $3. You might really enjoy that. So let's take a break before I talk about what's in this new idea I have. Okay, is that long enough? Everybody's checked out the Kickstarter? $3? I mentioned that, right? $3? So, my whole idea, again, is to take 5th edition and just dial it back a little bit. Look at the way, and a lot of that can be done just through class design. You don't even need to tinker with the core mechanics. The core mechanics are solid. You could play a high-power game or a low-power game pretty much with D&D the way it is, except for class design. You do have to look at class design and see that sort of power capability that classes get as they level up. My other design goal, in terms of looking at the older games, is when you think about the old basics, you had the dwarf, you had the elf, and you had the halfling, and they didn't really have a class. They were just this sort of, what is an archetypical halfling? What is an archetypical dwarf? And what is an archetypical elf? And while I think that's a little bit too constraining for the modern play style, I did think, what can you do with that concept? How can you think about those character ancestries that aren't human and give them some flavor that they can have that doesn't feel like they're just a human with pointy ears? Because right now, D&D, a lot of those ancestries feeling a little bit homogenized because they don't have anything that really feels specific to their culture. So if you take the race as class concept and you sort of divorce the whole idea of the race, but think about how their culture might affect the kind of class that PC would be. And so I came up with some ideas to say, okay, let's define what is a melee class for a dwarf, and then what is like a casting class for a dwarf. And then similar, what does the melee class look like for an elf, and what does the sort of the spellcaster class look like for an elf? And then last but not least, the same thing with a halfling. What is a more melee-focused halfling versus maybe a more magically focused halfling? And so I came up with several class concepts, and I developed three of them. One of them being called the Dwarf Earth Shaper. And the whole idea behind the Dwarf Earth Shaper is dwarves in their culture are all about building their fortresses within the mountains or in the hills, but these are architectural wonders under the earth, or sometimes on top of, because they can build their castles out from their, you know, tunnel under frames, so to speak. So you might have these beautiful dwarven exterior architecture, and then you go inside and there's these, massive caverns and vaulted ceilings and, flying buttresses and the whole 9 yards of dwarven engineering. And so I thought, well, if you had a caster class that comes from that society, how would your magic be focused? And so it would be about their mining, about their crafting, about the engineering that the dwarven society has. So my idea for the sort of that spell casting dwarf is a little bit like a cleric, but not quite. They have elemental powers that are earth and fire related, because that comes from the idea of the forge or the construction of these massive underground vaults and cities and whatnot. So they're very much about stone and fire in terms of their elemental focus. So I created a caster class that has some melee capability, but they're also focused on fire magic, on earth magic. They might like power up their fists to turn them stony hard to punch the crap out of, whatever creatures might be crawling out of the deep earth and invading the dwarven holds. Or they might have the utility powers of, shaping the earth. They have to dig out these massive vaults. They have to create massive stone pillars. So they would have sort of an elemental manipulation capability to them. So that's the focus for the Dwarf Earthshaper. They have some melee capability, but they also have some utilitarian spells. Their whole cultural focus is around that engineering idea, mining and crafting, building, creating this cities under the earth. Similarly, you look at something like an elf, and you look back at what the earlier editions had for an elf. And the elves, as a class, when they were a racist class, were very much like a fighter magic user creation. As a matter of fact, in the very earliest version of the game, they were both a fighter and a magic user. But before you went on an adventure, you actually picked which role they were using on that adventure. And they could only use that role for that adventure until they went back to town. So they'd go in and they could be the fighter guy, but they didn't cast spells. Or they go in and they could be the wizard guy, but they didn't really fight. It was a very interesting way of looking at the elf in terms of abstracting what it means in that sort of old school war game style. But I took the idea of the elf and decided what is, in terms of our pop culture, what is an elf and a D&D elf. And of course, they're very much tied to nature. They live in the outdoors. They live harmoniously with the outdoors. So they might still have beautiful elven cities, but they are very much a part of nature. They're not carving out nature to create their cities. They are using nature as a part of their dwellings, in their homelands, everything like that. So clearly a sort of that fighter magic user idea would be very elementally focused in terms of plants and a little bit of earth too, but more like the above ground earth rather than the below ground earth. Wind and water and that sort. So they are also sort of elementally based, but more from a nature standpoint, a little bit more druidic in the D&D sense of a druid, a little bit more like a ranger in terms of their melee side. So I took that idea and tried to congeal that into a class that has some melee capability, but also uses their nature magic for, enhancing that melee capability. Sort of thinking very much like, again, that sort of nature fighter, magic user, druidic almost style of class. And then lastly, I had to think about what makes a halfling. And halflings were sort of the most challenging because they don't have the same kind of focus that you think of when you think of a dwarf or an elf. Again, dwarves being the underground dwellers that build these cities, but all under the earth, and elves being the above ground dwellers that build these cities, but as part of nature. Halflings are that sort of strange pastoral place. But I thought, what would shape that if they are living in an agricultural society, if they're living in a world that has orcs and goblins and other creatures that are on the edge of their sort of civilization that are coming in from the wilds, how would that shape their melee classes? How would that shape their magic classes? So the first class that I came up with was what I'm calling the ferret. The halfling ferret, and the reason they're called that is that these are outriders. These are patrollers, warriors and scouts who, you have the shire reeves, the sheriffs in the towns, but they don't guard the edges of the sort of territories, so to speak. And so when things are coming in from the outside, the shire reeves need a special unit of warriors and scouts and things that can sort of protect civilization from the edge of the darkness outside of civilization. So the halfling ferret is a scout, is a fighter. They have these giant ferret animal companions that they can kind of ride or just have along with them as part of their, kind of like a police dog in that sense. So that is the halfling ferret is the halfling class. The dwarf earth shaper is the dwarf class, and the elf warden is the elf sort of fighter magic user nature class. Those are the three I'm developing for this particular zine on Kickstarter. And I have three more that are a possibility if the Kickstarter goes far enough, or, maybe another zine in the coming months or next year during ZineQuest in February of 2025. 2025, right? Yeah. And so that way these class redesigns can be played under sort of standard 5th edition rules, but they will be powered more appropriately for that sort of old school game. They're not super powered folks. They are heroes, but they are the Bruce Willis diehard action hero in that vein, rather than the, like I said, Iron Man or Thor of the Marvel universe. So if that kind of thing sounds interesting to you, again, it's only $3. Check it out. I think you might like it. I'm going to talk a lot more about the design philosophies, especially on the Discord server when folks start pledging to the Kickstarter. I'm going to start sharing that, and we're going to talk design, and I'm going to get people's ideas or opinions. Like I said, I have these three classes designed already. We can start play testing them. I can get feedback. I can ask what people don't like about them. Are they not simplistic enough? Does the power level need to be dialed back even further? Or are they kind of good where they are? I don't feel like they should be powered up anymore. I think they're kind of at that level. If I step them up, it's just going to be more like a standard 5th edition class. And again, I'm trying to dial them back a little bit. So, but I may not have gone far enough in terms of power creep. in terms of the levels. So those are great discussions that I think we'll be having on Discord server about the design. And again, then we have the 3 non-human classes, and then the 4 standard classes: warrior, priest, mage, rogue. So I hope you check out the Kickstarter. It's only $3. I think we'll get funded if we just get, let's see, I need like less than 100 people to pledge to get to the funding level that I'm asking. It's not very much at all. And I think it'll be a fun product. And it's only $3. Seriously, what is there to lose? So thank you. I've been Marty. And thank you for sitting through the explanation. I'd love to hear your comments or other questions. I'll be answering them on the blog or down below in the YouTube comments. So check us out. Again, Marty, Raging Owlbear. Check out some of my other content on YouTube too. Like, subscribe, help a brother out with the algorithm, as they say. And hopefully I'll see you soon on Discord and other places so I can push this idea forward and get some people playtesting, because I'm really excited about it. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.